63 years of living teaches you to stop second-guessing your gut. My late husband Eugene used to say I had a sixth sense about people, and after raising 2 children on my own for the past 8 years since he passed, I'd learned to trust that quiet alarm that rang somewhere behind my sternum whenever something wasn't right. It rang on a Sunday afternoon in March, the moment my daughter-in-law Sabrina called. If you're watching today, please subscribe and let me know where you're tuning in from. By the end of this story, you'll understand why a grandmother's instinct may be the most powerful thing in any family. Hi, Mom. Sabrina only called me Mom when she wanted something. The rest of the time I was Holden's mother, or simply the woman sitting at the far end of the Thanksgiving table. I'd made my peace with the distinction years ago. I understood what it meant. Sabrina, I said, keeping my voice warm. How are the kids? Oh, they're wonderful. A brief pause, the kind that means the real purpose of the call hasn't arrived yet. Actually, that's sort of why I'm calling. Holden has been running himself into the ground with the business lately. I've been thinking about planning a little getaway for us, just a long weekend somewhere warm. The kids would stay with my sister. My son Holden had been running his residential renovation company for 12 years. The past several months had been the busiest of his career, back-to-back contracts, crews to manage, budgets to balance. The last time I'd seen him, at my granddaughter Penny's school recital, 3 weeks earlier, he'd sat beside me in those plastic folding chairs and fallen half asleep by the second song. I'd told myself it was just the hours. I'd wanted to believe that. That sounds like a good idea, I said carefully. He could use the rest. Right, exactly. Her voice brightened. The thing is, I want it to be a surprise, so I can't use our joint card. He'd see the charges. And his business accounts are tied up right now with an equipment deposit. I was hoping I could use the emergency card, just for the hotel and travel. I set my coffee cup down on the counter. The emergency card. 2 years ago, after Eugene's younger brother had a stroke with no one close enough to help, I'd set up a dedicated savings account. $4,000, a debit card attached to it, for genuine family emergencies, medical situations, a broken-down car in the middle of nowhere, something the children truly needed. I'd given Sabrina a card because she was home with Penny and my grandson Sam most days. For anything serious, I'd told her, real emergencies only. Holden had also, after Eugene passed, added me as a joint account holder on his primary family accounts. Just in case, Mom, he'd said. I'd thought it was morbid at the time. Which hotel are you looking at? I asked. A resort in Scottsdale. It's beautiful, and honestly, the warmth would do Holden so much good. A small, rehearsed laugh. Let me think on it, I told her. I'll call you this evening. She didn't like that. I could hear it in the silence before she regrouped. Of course! Just keep in mind I need to book by tonight, or we lose the room. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The emergency card had never been for resort weekends, and something else was pulling at me. When I'd had lunch with Holden 2 weeks ago, he hadn't mentioned any upcoming trip. We'd talked about the jobs he was juggling, about Penny's reading level jumping ahead 2 grades, about young Sam's total, and complete devotion to anything with a long neck and a small brain. Not one word about a vacation. I called my daughter Gail. She asked for the emergency card. Gail's voice went flat in the particular way it did when she was working very hard to keep her opinion to herself. For a surprise getaway, I said. Claims Holden doesn't know about it. Did Holden mention any trip when you had lunch? No. A pause. Mom, I've been trying to reach him all week. He called me back 3 days late. That is not like him. It was not. Holden was the one who called back same day, who remembered birthdays, who showed up early to help you move furniture. His reliability was one of the things I'd always been most proud of about him. I'm going to tell Sabrina the emergency account isn't for travel, I said. Good, Gail said. Trust your gut, Mom. I called Sabrina back and told her exactly that. Her warmth evaporated somewhere in the middle of my second sentence. She hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark and kept seeing Holden's face at the recital. The shadows under his eyes, the way he'd hugged me goodbye and held on half a second longer than usual. The way he'd done that as a little boy when something was wrong that he didn't know how to say. Monday morning, I made a big pot of chicken and wild rice soup, packed it in a thermal container, added a lemon pound cake, and drove 40 minutes to his house. I hadn't called ahead. It was a weekday morning. He'd be at a job site. I'd leave the food on the porch with a note. His truck was in the driveway. I knocked twice, then a third time, harder. Nothing. The truck being there and no answer moved something cold through me. I tried the side gate, unlocked, and went around back. Knocked again. Called his name. Tried the handle. The door opened. I found my son on the kitchen floor. He was conscious, barely. His face was the color of old ash. He was leaning against the base of the cabinet like he'd been trying to stand and hadn't managed it. He looked up at me with eyes that didn't quite focus and said, my name in a voice, so thin I almost didn't recognize it. I called 911 before I even knelt down beside him. The air doctor told me later that if I'd arrived 2 or 3 hours after I did, we might be having a very different conversation. Holden's blood sugar had reached a level that qualified as a medical crisis. Undiagnosed type 2 diabetes, ignored for who knows how long because my son, exactly like his father before him, did not believe in seeing a doctor until something was visibly on fire. He was severely dehydrated, in diabetic ketoacidosis, and had been on that kitchen floor for what they estimated was 4 to 5 hours. 4 to 5 hours. Alone. I sat with him in the ER and kept reaching for his hand just to feel that he was warm. At some point I thought, where is Sabrina? I tried her cell, no answer. Tried again, nothing. A third time, voicemail. I asked Holden, in a moment when his eyes came open, if Sabrina knew he'd been feeling unwell. Tired, he said, just the one word. It was his daughter's gymnastics coach who finally told me, by accident, when I called the studio to let them know Penny might miss practice that week. Oh, is everything okay with the family? She asked. Penny mentioned her mom was going on a trip. A trip. I opened Instagram. Sabrina had never made her account private. She liked the reach. I found her profile in 30 seconds. Posted 6 hours ago. Sabrina at an outdoor bar in a yellow sundress, laughing at something off camera, a drink in her hand. The location tag said Sedona, Arizona. In the next photo, posted 4 hours later, a man stood beside her, late 30s, broad shoulders, easy smile. His arm was around her in a way that left nothing ambiguous. The caption read, "Needed this escape more than I knew." I sat in a hospital waiting room with my son in the ICU and looked at those photographs for a long moment. Then I opened my banking app. I went through the accounts one by one, joint checking, joint savings. The household credit card Holden and Sabrina shared. I found 3 charges from the past 48 hours. A resort in Sedona, $890. A restaurant, $340. A spa, $210. I called Gail. He's stable, I told her, because that came first. He collapsed at home. Diabetic ketoacidosis. He's going to be okay. I heard her breath catch, heard the sound of her getting her keys. There's more. Sabrina is in Sedona. She's been there since before he was admitted. She's not alone. Gail was quiet for a few seconds. I'm on my way, she said. Don't do anything until I get there. I thought about that for about 30 seconds. Joint checking, I removed Sabrina's access. Joint savings, same. Household credit card, reported to the bank as potentially compromised. Card canceled. The emergency account, the one I'd set up, the one she'd tried to use for a resort weekend, I closed entirely and moved the funds to a new account in my name only. I was back in the waiting room, hands perfectly steady, when Gail arrived. She took one look at my face, accounts. handled. She sat down and took my hand. We didn't say anything for a while. Some situations don't need commentary. 52 minutes after I'd closed the last account, my phone rang. Sabrina. There's a problem with our cards. No greeting. Clipped, controlled. Everything's being declined. How inconvenient, I said. What did you do? I secured my son's financial accounts. He's in the ICU, Sabrina. He collapsed alone on his kitchen floor this morning. The doctors estimate he'd been there for hours. I kept my voice completely even. Your Instagram, on the other hand, seems to be working just fine. A long silence. I didn't know, she said. You didn't know because you didn't answer. Not when the hospital called. Not when I called. 3 times. I paused. I'd start thinking about what you plan to say to Holden when he wakes up. I ended the call. Gail was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face since she was about 12, right after I'd handled a situation with a bully at her middle school. A kind of quiet, startled recognition. Mom, she said. Don't, I told her. I'm not done being furious yet. Holden woke up the following afternoon. Color had returned to his face. His eyes were clear. The first thing he said when he saw me was, "You made the soup, didn't you?" It's in the nurse's refrigerator, I told him. They said you can have it tomorrow. He almost smiled. Then his eyes moved around the room, taking in the absence of anyone else, and I watched his face go through something I recognized. Not surprise, but the particular heaviness of a man watching something he'd been dreading finally arrive. She's in Sedona, I said quietly. She's been there since before you were admitted. I'm sorry, Holden. He was quiet for a long moment. Is she with someone? It wasn't really a question. Yes. He looked at the ceiling. When he looked back at me, something had settled in his face. Not peace. More like the steadiness of a person who has been waiting for a thing to happen and has finally stopped waiting. I've known something was wrong for about 6 weeks, he said. I found charges on a card I wasn't supposed to know she had. Hotels, a restaurant in Atlanta I'd never heard of. Twice. He exhaled slowly. I contacted a lawyer 10 days ago. I was waiting until the Delancey contract wrapped up at the end of April. I didn't want to blow up the business in the middle of a big job. I stared at my son. She moved nearly $9,000 out of our joint savings over the past 4 months, he continued quietly. Small transfers. Nothing that would set off an automatic alert. My lawyer flagged it when we pulled the statements. $9,000, while he worked 60-hour weeks to keep the business running. While he fell asleep at his daughter's school recital. I've already frozen her access, I said. Everything. He looked at me for a moment, and then, despite everything, despite the IV line in his arm and the monitors beeping and the hospital gown that made him look younger than his 44 years, he almost laughed. Of course you did, he said. Call your lawyer when you're stronger. Tell him the timeline has changed. Already on my calendar. He was going to be fine. I could see it clearly, the way you can see certain things when you've known someone since, before they had a name. Sabrina showed up at the house on Wednesday, 2 days after Holden's locksmith visit. She stood in the driveway and called me, which told me she'd realized she had no one else to call. This is completely unreasonable, she said. Her voice was different now. All the sweetness was gone, and what was underneath it was harder and colder than I'd expected. Those are my children's things in that house. The children are with your sister, I said, and this wasn't my decision. You should speak with Holden's lawyer. Holden has a lawyer? He's had one for 10 days. The sound she made wasn't a word. I was at his house the following morning, getting it ready for when he came home, when Gail brought the children over. Penny came around the back of the house first. All's long legs and her father's serious eyes, and walked straight into my arms without saying anything. I held her and let her be still for a moment, because she'd been holding herself to several days, and she deserved the chance to stop. Sam came next, trailing his stuffed triceratops by one leg. He looked around the yard with the philosophical calm that belongs uniquely to 6-year-olds. "Is Daddy home yet?" "Tomorrow, sweetheart." He considered this, then held up the triceratops. "Can Rex sleep in Daddy's room tonight, so he has company?" I took the dinosaur from him carefully. "I think Daddy would love that." Penny had stepped back from me. She was looking at the house, at the flower beds, with that quiet, watching quality she always had. "Grandma," she said, "where's Mom going to live?" 8 years old. She had known the shape of this before any adult said a word. Children always do. "That's going to take a little time to figure out," I said. "But no matter what happens, you and Sam are going to be right here. This is your home." She thought about this for a moment. "Okay," she said. One small word from one small person. I held myself together, but barely. The divorce took 7 months. Sabrina's lawyer initially contested the asset division. Then the documented transfers came to light. $9,000 moved to a personal account over 4 months, along with the credit card charges from Sedona, and the contest quietly ended. Holden got the house. He got primary custody of Penny and Sam. He started seeing his doctor regularly. He monitors his blood sugar now with the same discipline he brings to every job site. Penny made the travel soccer team and called me from the car afterward, barely able to get the words out fast enough. Sam has 17 dinosaurs and counting, and he explains the difference between a triceratops and a torosaurus to me every single visit, with the patient certainty that I simply haven't understood it yet. I've been asked since everything's settled whether I regret driving over that Monday morning without calling ahead. Whether a phone call first might have been more sensible. No, not for a single second. My son was on that kitchen floor. Every alarm bell I had was ringing before I even knew why, and I listened. That's the thing about instinct. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't give you reasons or reassurances. It just rings, and you have to decide whether you're going to answer it. I am 63 years old. I have buried a husband, raised 2 children, built a life out of the pieces of things that didn't go the way I'd planned. I have learned a great many things in those 63 years, and the most important one is this: when something tells you to show up for the people you love, you show up. Without warning, without a plan, with nothing but a pot of soup and the absolute refusal to leave well enough alone. That's not a sixth sense. That's just what it means to be a mother.